Hi, I'm Mimi Geerges. NPR host Diane Rehm lost her husband after 54 years of marriage. Now, she's announced her retirement after 36 years on the air and redefining life on her own.
I do not for one moment regard what he did as suicide. He decided to relinquish his life.
Welcome to the Mimi Geerges Show. The Diane Rehm Show has been a Washington institution for nearly 40 years. The 2-hour daily call-in show airs around the country to almost 2.5 million listeners per week. In 2014, John Rehm, Diane's husband, was 83 years old and physically debilitated from Parkinson's disease. He decided that he wanted to end his life, but his doctor told him that the state of Maryland prohibited him from helping. Diane has written about losing her husband and her advocacy for the right to die in her memoir called On My Own. Diane, welcome.
It's good to be here with you, Mimi.
It is so good to see you because we met for the first time 23 years ago.
Gosh.
I was young and eager to get into the broadcast business, and you encouraged me. I volunteered for you and worked with you for many years, and here we are. I'm interviewing you.
How wonderful. Good.
It's been almost 2 years since John died.
Right.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm really all right. I have continued with my work, continued with my activities and friendships and doing what I do. I will tell you that there are waves of grief that come on me totally unexpectedly. I was walking to my car this morning, which is parked beneath my condo, and that wave just hit me. You never know, but I probably miss him even more now. I think immediately after he died, I was so caught up in everything that had to be done that you sort of shield yourself. And I know I stayed as busy as I possibly could in those days and weeks after he died. And I still do that, but it doesn't stop those waves from catching up with me.
He was 83 when he decided to end his life. What kind of condition was he in, physically and cognitively?
Cognitively, he was quite with it. Physically, he had reached a point where he could no longer feed himself. He could no longer take care of himself in any way. Parkinson's had really taken its toll. He could no longer walk from bed to bathroom. He was in assisted living with caregivers around the clock, and it was really hard for him. So he asked our son, our daughter, our doctor, and me to be with him. Our daughter is herself a physician. She was on the phone from Boston, and he said, "I'm ready to die." And the doctor, precisely because he was in assisted living in Maryland, could not help him at all, but did say to him, "The only thing you can do for yourself, John Rehm, is to stop eating, stop taking medication, and stop drinking water."
Essentially starving himself to death.
And you probably know, as I did, that you can go for a long time without food, but you cannot go for a long time without water. The organs begin to break down quickly.
How did you feel about this?
John and I had talked about death and dying for many years. My parents had died when I was quite young. My mother was only 49. My father died of a broken heart 11 months later. John's father took his life after realizing he had diabetic retinopathy and was going blind, could no longer live alone. John's mother took her life at 92. So it was all around us, and we had promised each other that we would help one another when the time came. But of course, I could do nothing. I simply said to him the next day, "Sweetheart, are you sure that this is what you want?" And he said, "Absolutely. I am ready. I am falling into degradation. I don't want to go any farther."
Would he feel any pain during this process?
How can I know? He asked the doctor, "Will I feel pain?" And the doctor assured him he would not. And for the first couple of days after he stopped eating and drinking, he looked great. His skin was rosy and his eyes were bright, and I said, "Goodness, you look wonderful." And he said, "I feel great." And I think it was because he felt he had taken his life back into his own hands.
There's no easy way to lose a loved one, but I wonder, having this over a 10-day, 2-week period, was that harder for you?
Oh my God, it was terrible to be there every single day and see that poor man just lying there, not moving, barely moving any part of his body, just in a very, very deep sleep. Very hard, Mimi, to watch that. He was such a strong man. He was such a vital man, so curious about life, so interested in everything around him. But Parkinson's is a devastating disease which robs people not only of their physical ability to function, but their interest in life. And that's what John began to lose.
Diane, I know that you're a woman of faith, and John was too. Isn't it up to God to decide when we die and how we die?
I think for some people that's exactly the decision that they would wish to make. I will go when God takes me. And I so support that thinking. On the other hand, there are people who would say, "I want every element of palliative care. Keep me comfortable and keep me alive as long as possible." I totally support that as well. And then there is the third option, which is choice. I want to go when I am ready to go. If life no longer has meaning for me, if I am so ill, if I have pain, discomfort, I don't want comfort care, that will be the time I say I want to go. So any choice is fine with me for you or anyone to have, but I want my choice for me.
I know that you're an advocate for the right to die.
Yes.
What limits do you think there should be on that? Should there be, after a certain age, you can make that decision, or after a certain, with certain illnesses?
I don't know about limitations, Mimi. I certainly wouldn't wish for a child to be in a position to make that decision. But any person of adult age who reaches a point of sickness or even mental distress that is so devastating, and who has sought help and yet cannot find any means of relief. Who am I to say that that person should not have choice? You know, it was so interesting. California became the most recent state to grant the right to die with dignity. And in the signing statement, Governor Brown wrote, and I'm paraphrasing here, "I do not know now what I would choose for myself. The only thing I do know is that I would not wish for someone else to make that decision for me." And as you know, he is a Jesuit. He is a man of extreme faith. I thought that signing statement said it perfectly.
There are, as you said, a few states that have this right, this doctor-assisted suicide, it's also called.
Well, they don't really. Nobody calls it suicide. They call it doctor-assisted death.
Okay.
Or dying with dignity. I feel what Diane Rehm did was to relinquish his life. I do not for one moment regard what he did as suicide. He decided to relinquish his life.
Would you like to see this taken up on the national level instead of state by state?
I think an issue like this probably is better taken up from states exactly as gay marriage was. And eventually, this will, I'm sure, get to the Supreme Court as a national issue. Right now, I think at state level, California may be the tipping point. Oregon came first, then came the state of Washington, Vermont followed, New Mexico, and now you have California. We shall see.
You say in your book that you have a lot of feelings of guilt. What is that about?
Guilt because you know, as I do, that when we take our marriage vows, it is for better, for worse, in sickness and in health. And I knew that in order to really take care of John, I would have to leave my work, give up my job, stay at home, and take care of him. And Mimi, I know of myself, I am not a good caregiver. There are wonderful caregivers in this world. I do not identify myself as one of them. So I do feel guilt. I feel a certain amount of guilt that John had to eventually go to assisted living, but I knew he could get the care there that I could not give him at home. I think we would both have felt resentment. He would not have wanted me to give up my job. He would not have wanted.
Was he unhappy that he went to assisted living?
Initially, absolutely. I cannot imagine many people who are not. And yet I was there every day or every other day, and as soon as I walked in, he'd smile and we'd laugh together and talk about a great many things. I'm so glad we had that time to talk. He was there from November of 2012 until he died on June 23rd of 2014.
He was very proud of you and supportive of your radio career.
Yes, he was.
You have made the decision to step down at the end of this year. What prompted that decision?
I am 79 years old. I will be 80, and I felt it was time, having had that wonderful radio program now for 37 years. I feel it's time for a newer, younger voice, for newer ideas, for newer something fresh to move into that position. I feel so privileged to have been there for all this time. And yet, I think my decision is right to step away from the microphone. I'll stay at the station. I will do fundraising for them. I'll help them raise their profile, but I'll also be speaking out around the country about the right to choose how we die, to wait for God, to continue to have palliative care, or to go when I choose.
What will you miss the most about your program?
The people walking
It is great.
in and seeing my wonderful staff, seeing the exciting people who walk in every day. But Mimi, I know that this is the right decision. I had actually made the decision before John died to step away from the microphone. I know I have a great deal of energy, and that's wonderful, but I think that the energy that flows through me can be turned in other directions now, ones that don't demand that I rise each morning at 5 a.m.
I hear you.
I'm a little weary of that.
You had said you wanted to wait till after the election
Yes,
to retire.
absolutely.
It's a very interesting election this year.
To say the least.
Do you think the media has a role in what's become of this election?
Well, I think that the people who are involved in the election have certainly drawn attention to themselves. There are those who would argue that Donald Trump, for example, would never have gotten as far as he has without the media attention. But how could the media not cover him? He was drawing attention to himself by virtue of what he was saying, by virtue of what he was doing.
And it's not just him. I mean, the candidates are being rewarded for being uncivil with each other.
Absolutely. I would have to say it's the wackiest election process that I, in all my years.
And you've seen a lot of elections.
And I've seen a lot of elections going back to the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980. The first election I voted in was the one John F. Kennedy won. And of course, my husband worked in the Kennedy and Johnson administrations. He became the first general counsel to the office of the special trade representative. So we had so much fun during those years, and I stayed at home for 14 years. As you know, raising children before I began my radio career. So it seems a good time.
You know, a lot of people criticize the sound of your voice, your deliberate pacing.
Sure.
What do you say to that?
All I can tell you, Mimi, is that, I have been on book tour for my latest book, and what people have said to me is how much they appreciate the pacing and the sound of my voice, because there are so many perfect voices on radio and television, and mine stands out because it is imperfect, because, as you know, I have something called spasmodic dysphonia, for which I am treated every 4 months by getting an injection of botulinum toxin right into those vocal cords. And yes, the face you're making is quite right. It hurts, but it's worth it, because I was first diagnosed in 1998, which could have ended my career. But at least the doctors found a form of treatment for me that works, and so I've been able to continue.
A lot of radio and TV shows come and go. What has been the secret of your show's success and longevity?
Civilized talk, conversation that matters, subjects that reach people's minds as well as their hearts. We do 2-hour-long programs each day, 10 hours a week, and people are with us. And the audience has grown and grown and grown from when we started out on the campus at the American University, and the signal used to go off the air when you went off the curb. And now we reach about 2.5 million people per week.
Diane, what do you want your legacy to be as a radio host?
That she learned to listen well. I think what we do should be called listening shows rather than talk shows, because if you do not know how to listen, there will be no cohesion to the conversation. Listening is key. Listen, listen, listen. People have asked me, what do you tell young people who are just starting out? Learn to listen carefully and to read bodies, to read eyes, to read facial gestures, to read bodies, and to really be with the person or persons you are with, but to make sure that the conversation flows so that by the end of an hour, people will say, I learned something.
And of course, you learn from every conversation.
I've never stopped learning. It's been my graduate degree, on the air, in front of millions of people, just learning.
So Diane, what advice do you give to women who have lost a spouse and suddenly found themselves on their own?
Everyone is different, and the advice I would give to myself may be totally different from what others would find useful, but because I've continued to work, I've been so fortunate. If I had not had a grand circle of friends, it would have been very difficult. They have been there with me the whole time, have made sure that When I didn't call them, they called me. But my work has really been so incredibly important to me. So I would say to anyone else, find something that you can do for you. Make sure that you keep your friends. Make sure you don't shut yourself away. Make sure you try to keep up with what's going on in the world so the attention is not focused on you as a widow or widower, but rather what you can give to the conversation or the friendship or the circle of friends. It's so important that you keep giving, because I think that is the secret no matter what your state of life is.
Diane, I want to thank you so much for being on the program. It's so nice to have you on my program. It's an honor for me.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here, Mimi.
This has been the Mimi Geerges Show. You can connect with us on social media and leave your comments there. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me again next time.